Welcome back to the OSM channel. In today's video, I'm going to take you along as I swap out and balance a new set of tires on the Ford F250. Now the tires I have here are the BFGoodrich Ko3's. These are LT tires, light truck tires. They're designed to handle heavier loads, which is what you want on an F250, F350. Anyway, the Ko3's, they basically took the Ko2's, they re-engineered them into the Ko3's, and these are supposed to be a better tire. You know, they changed up the tread patterns. They changed something with the nubs on the side of the tire. From my understanding, that's supposed to help release mud out of the treads. They've also added more siping, which are the squiggly lines on the treads. Now for every sipe, from my understanding, that gives you another edge where the tires can bite into. These are also triple snow peak rated tires, which in some jurisdictions, you know, some roads, they will not allow you on that road unless you have triple snow peak rated tires and or chains. So probably more than I need, but I'll take all the traction I can get. Now these are expensive, $350 a tire, so you get the idea. You know, 4 tires out the door with shipping and taxes, you're looking at $1,500. It's very tempting to go with some of those cheaper Chinesium tires, but I think this is a really important investment, especially if you have kids like I do, literally where the rubber meets the road. So without further ado, let's go over to the truck. We'll take all the tires off the truck, and I like to thoroughly wash the rims, get all that brake dust and grime off there, and then we start with a clean, fresh rim, which is really nice. But the other big question of the day is, I bought these Katool tire changing and balancing machines about 2 years ago. I've done a few sets of passenger car tires, but I'm really curious to see how they'll do with these thicker LT tires. These tires, I believe, are 10 ply, so we'll see how things go. All right, so I just finished pulling the wheels off the truck. A few things I want to go over. For one, I laid down a board so that way I ensure that I don't scratch the rims. And it also allows that filth and dust and gunk to flow away, and we're not going to be sitting in a puddle of our own filth. Next thing I want to cover, these are the original tires that were put on from the factory. These are Goodyear Wrangler tires, and I'd say they're okay. You know, I give them 7 out of 10 stars. They're quiet, good even tread wear. Of course, you gotta rotate your tires properly, but they definitely left a bit to be desired in terms of traction. Just to show you what the treads look like after 46,000 miles, pretty decent. I probably could get away with a few more thousand miles on these tires, but with the severe winter expected, I think it's the right decision to swap these out. Another thing, really important thing I want to cover is Ford cheaped out when they mounted these tires onto these rims from the factory. And I say that because when it comes to balancing the rims and tires, the wheels, there's 2 types of balancing. There's static balancing, which means you only balance one side. And then there's also dynamic balancing, in which you balance the inboard and the outboard side of the wheel. Now, you can see we only have clip-on weights on the inboard side of the wheel, and there's no stick-on weights on the other side. There's not an area for clip-on weights on the other side of the wheel either. So this tells me that these were only static balanced, which is fine, but the better thing to do would be dynamic balancing. It's just gonna help to ensure you have the smoothest and quietest ride possible. Now, rims, they vary. Some rims you can install clip-on wheel weights on both sides. On these aluminum alloy rims, we can only do clip-on weights on the inboard side. And as for the outboard, we're going to have to do stick-on weights, and that's the main reason, well, one of the main reasons why we are thoroughly cleaning everything to ensure those stick-on wheel weights adhere properly to the rim. So that's enough yabbering. Let's clean these up, dry them off, and get to work. Now that we have our rims nice and clean, what we need to do now is remove all the air out of all the tires. And we're going to do that by removing the valve core, which I believe is also known as a Schrader valve. So we're going to remove that with this little tool. If you notice, there's a little slot, so we're going to insert this into the valve stem. Rotate counterclockwise to remove the valve core. You might want to put your hearing protection on and safety glasses on now because it gets a little loud. So we start by breaking the bead. And the bead is the seal in between the tire and the rim. And these tires can really get latched on the rim. So you're not going to be able to really do this by hand unless you have a specialized sledgehammer. Best thing to do is to use a bead breaker on a tire machine. So what there's a big pneumatic piston that draws this bead breaker steel plate towards the rim. It basically pinches down on the tire, pinches that in, and it basically pops the bead off. There's a foot pedal here to retract the pneumatic ram. And the other thing you really got to pay attention to here is your valve stem, because on the back side of that valve stem there's a TPMS sensor, tire pressure monitoring sensor, and during this whole process we got to be very careful not to damage that sensor. So when I'm breaking the bead on a tire, what I like to do is position that TPMS sensor, the valve core, valve stem, on the opposite side of where I'm breaking the bead. So I'll take my knee, put it in the tire, just rotate it up. This plate on the tire machine is what the rim is going to sit against. So we'll line this up. Got to rotate my table slightly. It's good, good. So we're just going to position the bead breaker on the tire, very careful not to hit the rim. You know, there's a scratch guard here, but we're still trying not to hit it. We'll see if this can break the bead. Just like that. So that is the outboard side. What we're going to do, twist the tire around. We got to do the same thing on the inboard side. Again, I'm looking where the valve stem is over here. So it's the opposite side where the bead breaker is. That looks good. We'll retract this piston back slowly. Got it. Looks good. Beautiful. So we have our bead broken. What we need to do next is we need to remove any clip-on or stick-on wheel weights. So this is a wheel weight installation and removal tool. We would install the wheel weight by positioning it on the edge of the rim and hammering it on. Now to remove the wheel weight, notice how there's a little point on this tool. So what we're going to do, we're going to put that point in this little hole, and we're going to use this to leverage that clamp off the rim. Now this is a cheaper tool, it's not the best, but it usually works. That's how that comes off. Another important thing too, I've covered this in a short video, but there are many different profiles of these wheel weights. FE, you see the FE stamping, that just means it's made out of iron. If we go to the other side, that's the profile. So for this truck, this rim, it takes an IAW profile wheel weight. Very important you pay attention to that. So before we throw the wheel up onto the turntable here, I want to talk about how these dogs can engage with the rim. There's two ways that you can have these dogs engage with the rim. You could have them expand outward, but the issue with that, if you look at these dogs, when they expand outward, there's little metal teeth on here, and they will make marks on the inside of the rim, which isn't a problem if you have steel trailer rims that you don't really care about too much. But if you have nicer anodized aluminum rims like I do, I think they're anodized, not 100% sure, but I don't want to use this method because it will cause some damage. It'll have little imprints on the rim and I don't want that. So what we're going to do, as opposed to the inside out clamping method, is we are going to go from the outside in. So let's expand these dogs outward. And if you take a look at the dogs, notice how they curve back. And I also have these plastic protectors. So these plastic protectors are going to be the separation between the steel dogs and the edge of the rim, so we're not going to cause any damage. But basically, we'll throw the rim on top of here, we'll close these dogs slowly and ensure that these clamps pinch the inner edge of the rim, and then we should be locked in here and good to go. The only issue I found with this method when dealing with larger tires, sometimes there's not enough friction between these plastic pads and the rim, so sometimes I have to manually help it along. I have no problem with the horsepower of the turntable motor. It's electric, I think it's 2 horse. Got plenty of torque, plenty of power, but lose some friction here between these rim protectors and the rim, so sometimes it slips, but it's all good. Anyway, before we throw the rim and tire up here to take it off, let's lubricate the inside and the outside bead. So this is the bead lubricant I use, and on this machine, there's a bead lubricant bin, but if you dump a ton in here, what happens, it dries out over time. To help prevent that from happening, I've got a little slot in the rim of this holding bucket. That just helps it stay fresh a little bit longer, but it still will dry out, just like anything else. We'll get some lubricant. We'll get this lubricant in here. This is going to make it a lot easier to dismount this tire. We need to get this big heavy wheel up onto the turntable. I like to use my knee, so I'll have some good posture, bend my knee slightly, tire rested against my knee. We'll get it started here and then we'll kind of flip it down. We gotta get it centered. All right, I gave you guys a different view. You can see that dog, it's not engaged with the rim. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit this foot pedal and I'm gonna start slowly closing these dogs, just ensuring that they all engage with the edge of the rim. It's looking good. And that is the outside-in clamping method. That's the only way to do it if you don't want to damage your rims. All right, we have our rim clamped onto our table. What I want to do now is set the beak. So this is our beak. This is what we're going to use to leverage the tire off of the rim. So I'm going to push this down, have it hit the rim, and then I'm going to have it come up maybe a mil or two. So that's just a touch off the top of the rim. And the other adjustment we got to make is how close this beak sits towards the rim. And I'm gonna move this up a little bit, move you to the side so you can see what's going on. But up here, we have an adjustment screw, right? And this controls how far away the beak sits against the edge of the rim. And what I found, this being a cheaper tire changing machine, this flexes a little bit. So I like to let it touch. See, it's touching right there. And then I'll back it off a little bit, pull in, and just ensure that it doesn't really grind into the rim. Of course, there are plastic protectors on this beak. I'm not sure if you can see that or not. See, there's a plastic guard there, one on the back side. But still, you try not to have this ride the rim if you can avoid it at all. So now I'm going to spin the rim. And what we got to be very careful of here, again, is that TPMS sensor. And what I like to typically do, I like to have the TPMS sensor a little bit behind the beak, so when we come down here with our spoon, you know, we can peel this lip up and have the TPMS sensor away from the edge of the tire. I'm actually going to rotate this backwards just a little bit. That's about where I want to be. So it's been a little while since I've changed a set of tires. We'll see if I still got it, but I like to use this rim protector as well. The only issue with this rim protector is sometimes it takes up too much space and then you have a hard time working the tire off, so we'll see how we do today. But basically what we got to do, we got to push down on the tire on the left side, and the other side where we're trying to peel the tire over the rim, we've got to use the tire spoon to kind of peel it up and over the edge of the rim. So we'll get in here, make sure that the TPMS sensor is clear. So you can see we have the edge of this tire starting to peel over. And what I'm going to do with my foot, I'm going to hit the turntable rotate foot pedal, and we're going to try and continue to peel the bead off of the rim here. We have it started, it's looking good. You can see it's slipping. That's the issue we run into sometimes with the the plastic dog guards. So I'm going to try and help this along myself actually. So we'll hit the turntable button and give it a little push, see if that does it. That does it. Not a big deal. We all need a little help every now and then. But now we got to spin the rim back to where the valve stem is sitting just behind the leading edge of the beak, right about here. So I will say it's definitely trickier to get the lower edge of the tire peeled over the top edge of the rim. Here's the trick I employ. A block of wood on the opposite side of the tire, and what you do, you'd position this again on the complete opposite side, but you prop up the opposite edge of the tire, so this would be right here, and that helps to allow you to lift up the other side and get that spoon to peel over the lip of the tire. Another issue that I'm kind of running into, not a big deal, but as I try and rotate the tire, this spoon is staying stuck on the beak. So the simple fix for that is to grab a second spoon. And the amount of friction in between that second spoon and the rim protector should allow us to continue to peel the bead off the rest of the way. It should go relatively smoothly now. Move this spoon out of here. Again, we're slipping, so I'm just going to help this along. That's that. Not a big deal. Yeah, there's a good look at that TPMS sensor. So you get the idea. This is pretty fragile, and if you're not careful, you could easily break this. I don't know what it costs. Might have to reprogram it. But my method of having the beak positioned slightly ahead of that TPMS sensor, as we peel the bead of that tire up off the rim, there's never any tire pressure on that sensor, so I think that's the way to do it. Alright, so we're getting ready to install the new tire. A few key points before we install this tire though. First, we want to look it over, see if there's any damage, anything obvious. This one looks good. We'll see. We also want to ensure that it is the same size, load, and speed rating as the old tire. The speed rating is actually a little bit higher on this tire. This is a speed rating S, which that's a good thing, not complaining about that. Another thing you really got to pay attention to is if there is a directional arrow, a rotational arrow indicating that the tire can only rotate in one direction. And that's really important. If your tire has that, that means that you have to install two rotating to the right and two rotating to the left, so you'd have your passenger set of tires, your passenger side set of tires, and a driver's side set of tires. And you'd also have to be very careful how you rotate those tires as well. You can only do front to back. You can't front to back and diagonally back, which is typically how I do it. So this one looks good. It's in good shape. The only other thing we have to decide is, do we want black walls out or the white lettering, white walls out? I like the white lettering because it matches the truck. There's a blue coating on these, but I'm pretty sure they would turn white. The issue I have with the white lettering, after 10,000 miles, they start to crack, they get really dirty, so I think this go around, we're going to have black lettering out, black walls out. So let's lubricate this tire and install it on the rim. Okay, so what we're going to do now, we're going to move our beak back in, and here's what's going to happen. The lower edge of the tire is going to go over this guide, but it's going to go underneath the front beak. So this is going to sneak the edge of the tire onto the bead of the rim. And it should look like that. It's kind of hard to see. We're going up over the guide and underneath the front beak. But again, we really got to pay attention to our TPMS sensor. So I'm going to rotate this slightly and I'm going to put some pressure on this. We shouldn't need any tools. We should be able to walk this right on, but again, I'm really paying attention to that TPMS sensor. That's that. You know, now that I think about it, the issue with having the TPMS sensor here is as we rotate this on, you know, this has to be slightly down. So I'm thinking that's going to put a lot of pressure on the TPMS sensor. So what I think I'm going to do is actually move it, advance it to about the 6 o'clock position. We'll try that. I've never tried this before like this. I think that might be a better method. You see, like if we had the TPMS sensor here, as I push this down and work it on, it's going to put a lot of pressure on it. So I'm liking that. We'll see. See if this gives us any problems. I got these cheap clamps a while back. Sometimes they help with holding that tire on. That worked out really well. I think that was much better. I think we put a lot less strain, if any, on the TPMS sensor by when reinstalling it, having it in the 6 o'clock position. So another thing I want to talk about real quick, tire balancing paint marks. Most new tires have little paint marks on the sidewall of the tire that notes the light spot on the tire. And typically what you do, you line that paint mark up with your valve stem. Because you have your TPMS sensor here, your valve stem. In theory, this is the heavier edge of the rim. So by placing the light side of the tire here, when we go to balance this, it should make it a lot easier to balance. It should require as little weight as possible. But these Ko3's had no paint marks, so that's why I just kind of threw them on wherever they landed. So now we need to try and seat the bead on the tire. Okay, so I'm going to clip on the air to the valve core. Mind you, there's no Schrader valve in here. But what we're trying to do, we're trying to pop the bead on the inboard and the outboard side of the wheel, which it might go on its own, but if it doesn't seat, we're going to have to use the bead blaster. And this is actually going to go on its own. I don't hear air leaking. I saw it started to set. Hearing protection safety glasses. Very important. Okay, so that was the bottom bead just got set, and the top bead still needs to set. And you always want to be careful, you don't go too high with your pressures. Try to stay under 20 psi. Just to give you an idea, we're at about 8 psi, maybe 10. There we go. So I'm going to pop the air fill valve off. I'm just going to look at the other side. Make sure the bead looks good, which it does. So we're moving along here. What I'm going to do now is reinstall the Schrader valve. And I'll fill this tire up with some air. Okay, it is now time to balance this very heavy wheel. So how this is going to work, I'm going to lift this up out of the balancing shaft. Then I'm going to install a centering cone, and finally the tightening cap, nut, whatever you want to call it. That is a big boy. Alright, so to use this KT B760 wheel balancer, it does need to be bolted down to the floor. It does require a 120 volt power source. I have it plugged in. So first we're going to turn it on. A little on switch on the left side of the machine. Now if you do buy one of these balancing machines, obviously it's going to come with a instruction manual, but just quickly go over on my machine. On the left side of the control panel, we can manually adjust values A, B, and D. But usually we don't really have to adjust these because we use this automatic measuring stick, and I'll show you where we're going to align that onto the rim. But then There are 6 different balance settings on this machine, and I'll show you that on the monitor now. But to toggle between these settings, we would either hit F, which will cycle between SYN, static 1 and static 2. Now, this is an aluminum rim. It has a clip-on weight on the inboard side, and we're going to use stick-on weights on the outboard side on the inside of the rim. So we need to cycle the computer with the ALU button, and we're going to try and get to ALU2. There's ALU1, ALU2. We can also go to ALUS, which we're not going to use that. And then obviously we have our start button. Now there's 2 start buttons, I guess, in case one fails. That way you have a second one and your emergency stop, I guess. And you can adjust, you know, whether you want this machine set up in ounces or grams or inches or millimeters. All in the instruction manual. All right, so let's try dynamic balancing this wheel. So we're going to hit ALU. We need to get to ALU2, which that's going to have our clip-on weight on the inboard side and our stick-on weight on the outboard side. We'll take the measuring wheel. First we're going to hold it on the flange where we're going to clip on our weight, and then we're going to push it in. I like to have the tip centered where the wheel weights, stick-on weights are going to go. And if you look on the screen, we have our A value, which is the distance between the machine to this flange. We have our B value, which is the distance from the machine to the center of where those clip-on weights are going to go. And D corresponds to what the machine estimates the diameter of the rim is, which in this case, 18.2 is pretty good. But if I did need to adjust that, I would go over to the D toggle, but it only jumps up and down in increments of 5. This is set to inches, by the way. So if I went down, you know, we get to 17.7. But 18.2 is where it's going to have to be. So we are ready to try and balance this. Just going to double check that this is on here good and tight. Now this is a big rim and wheel for this machine. We'll see if it can do it. I like to give the wheel a bit of help, so I'll give it a big push, but obviously there's no wheel well here, so you want to pick out any rocks or debris in here and stand off to the side. We'll give her a good push. Get started. Help slow it down so we don't wear out the brakes, and that's calling for a good bit of weight, but this is also quite a big tire. It's calling for 3.5 ounces on the outboard and 2.5 on the inside, so we'll see how close we can get this. All right, so let's talk about how we're going to do this. So it's calling for 2.5 ounces on the inboard, 3.5 on the outboard. So this gets a little confusing because 2 things we got to talk about. For one, where the weights are going to be positioned on the rim. So for the inboard side, they're going to be positioned plumb with the shaft when these lines light up all the way. So right there, that's where our 2.5 ounces of weight is going to have to go. Plumb on the top of the rim right there. Now for the outboard value, 3.5 ounces, it's actually going to go on the bottom. And with this machine, this is one of the reasons why I bought this machine. I think you guys can see that. There's a laser line that lights up, and it lights up the rim. So again, for the outboard weights, they're going to go right on the bottom there, right in line with that laser, which is nice. Now another thing I want to talk to you about, these wheel weights, they come in ounces and grams, and chances are you're going to have a mix of each, and you're going to have to do some conversions. So the specific weights for this rim, IAW, only come in grams. So if we convert 2.5 ounces to grams, it would be 77 grams. So the closest I'm going to get is 80. Now, ideally, you'd have a single 80 gram weight, which I don't have. I have a 30, a 30, and a 20. So that'll get us to 80. It's not going to look pretty, but who's going to be looking at the inside of the rim? So we'll hammer on 80 grams of weight. We'll stick on 3.5 ounces on that laser line. Rebalance. See where we're at. So we have the right amount of weights installed in their proper locations. Let's give it a spin and see if it's perfectly balanced. So what I think I'm going to do, I think I'm actually going to remove these 3 weights that I installed. Now, there was a 100-gram weight that came off this rim, which originally was here, so it's kind of close. We'll pull these off. We'll put this 100-gram where it's calling for the 50, and we'll spin it again. See how that balances out. So 50 would be 14. 20 here. There's a column for the other 50. Yeah, right about where the other ones are. Throw another 50 on there. Alright, this should balance perfectly now. I'll take it. Not the prettiest looking thing, but if it's balanced to 0, I'll take it. So I just finished swapping out all the tires, got everything balanced, just like everything else. These 3, no problem, they went fine. This one I really struggled with on the balancer. First time I put it on, was calling for 5.5 ounces on the outboard side. So I thought, all right, I'll just rotate the tire 180 degrees on the rim, try it again. Well, I did that, it made it worse. And it called for about 6 ounces on the outboard side. So it doesn't look pretty. There's probably 6.5 ounces of weight there. Had to use a few clip-on weights here. But I just shut the machine off, but this thing is perfectly balanced. I ran it 2 or 3 times and it's good now. So it doesn't look pretty. Can you tell from the outside? Well, just don't look. Look at the pretty rims. We'll let the brake dust cover those weights up. You never know. As long as we're balanced, that's the main thing that matters. So let's go ahead and reinstall all these wheels back in the truck. So when I was mounting these tires, I only put 40 psi of air in the tires, so I gotta air them up all the way. Now a lot of people have this misconception. They look at the sidewall of the tire, you read the max psi, it says 80. So you think to yourself, oh, I should fill it up to 80. That's actually incorrect. You need to look at the label on the inside of your driver's side door. So this is what you need to pay attention to. Notice it wants us to put 60 psi into the front tire and 65 in the rear. The spare should be at 65 as well. 60 in the front, 65 in the rear. That's how it should be. So I'm going to finish up the rest of this off camera. I think you guys get the idea here. Just got to air up the rest of the tires, clean off the hubcaps, reinstall the valve caps, and things will be good. This definitely took a lot longer than what I thought it was going to take. It took pretty much the whole day, but also I was filming it. And, you know, I'm thinking if I went to a professional tire shop, they probably would have knocked this out in an hour or two. You know, they know all the little tricks here and there. But also, they probably would not have done the job to this level of precision. They wouldn't wash the rims without charging an extra amount, this and that. And, you know, when you go to those tire shops and mechanic shops, they kind of have you by the balls. They pressure you into getting this and that. Oh, while we're in there, we saw this. Really needs to be replaced. Meanwhile, the part's fine. Not saying all mechanics are like that, but you guys that have been in that situation know what it's like. So anyway, I'll let you know how these Ko3's do over time. I'd like to thank you for watching, and as always, I will catch you on the next one.